Okay, guys. Yeah, I guess I'll make a start. So I'm Tim, and this is Grace, and we're from the Student Advice Centre. So we're not actually part of Warwick Accommodation, but our job is predominantly to help people with housing problems, and we are part of the Student Union. So today at 12, Warwick Accommodation released their first batch of housing. You're going to have a talk from them like just after us, and that's not actually the last batch. You get more properties coming onto the market as the year goes on, but they do go live now. So I think Grace is going to start us off, and then I'll talk after that. So.
Cool. Okay, so this presentation is generally just to give you a bit of information about housing, to help you make good choices, so that you don't get rushed into any decisions now that might, any bad decisions you make now affect you for the whole of next year. So we'll give you all the information that you need to make a good choice. Key thing that we're going to say is, if you have any questions at all, make sure you seek advice. Don't, there's always someone there, someone at the advice centre, talk to Warwick Accommodation, someone's always there to help you. So yeah, the key thing is don't panic. Everyone gets a bit worried because there's a lot of talk about housing and everyone's talking about how they've got it all sorted and everything like that, and people worry that the houses are going to run out. They're not. Like, there are more houses coming on Warwick Accommodation. Most people find accommodation, and just make sure you don't get rushed into something that you're going to regret later. Okay, so these are the kind of things to consider when you're looking for accommodation. So who are you going to be with? Have you made your groups on Warwick Accommodation? How many of you are there going to be? So what kind of size house are you looking for? Whereabouts? Coventry, Leamington, Kenilworth. Type of accommodation. So if it's going to be private or if it's going to be or a shared house. Do you all kind of consider the same things a priority? So for some people, cleanliness might be a really big thing. Other people aren't, so worried about that. Also, can you afford it? Do you all have the same budgets? Are you looking for the same kind of thing? Something else to consider. Okay, this is just an interesting fact. A lot of people like to go for the bigger properties. You want to live together, and you would think, logically, that they're actually cheaper, but it tends to work out that the large properties are actually more expensive. An average 19% more per person per week than a 4-bedroom property. Okay, so the preference really is probably going to be Warwick Accommodation, and these are the reasons why. So any house provided by Warwick Accommodation has to fit their criteria, so there's definitely going to be high standards and quality. They do have housing available for the larger groups, so for 8 people, something like that. They have location, they have housing in all the usual student areas, particularly Leamington and Coventry, where Elsdon, where most people live. There's no deposits, there's no setup fees, you don't need a guarantor, and insurance is included. These are things you'd all have to think about if you're going to go through a private agent. So advice is definitely to try Warwick Accommodation first. Okay, this is just something to bear in mind. Most of the private contracts that are out there are for joint tenancies. So that means you're joint and severally liable if someone were to drop out. So it basically means that if someone leaves, the rest of the people in the house will be responsible for paying their rent, for paying all the bills, their share of it. You also have the right to reclaim it off them, if they don't pay it, but it is something to bear in mind. If someone does leave, you will have to cover the costs. It's not like a separate contract each. Can you give notice? Say you weren't getting on with your flatmates or something happened and you needed to leave. It is something that can be quite tricky. Most contracts don't have a break clause in it. They don't let you get out of it early. The only really way that you can get out of it is to find someone to take your place. So again, make sure you take your time and be really sure about who you're living with and that it's the right property for you. Okay, these things just to consider. Make sure that you know all the costs. A lot of costs can be hidden, especially if you go through a private agency, so make sure that you check with them first and that they're upfront with all the fees. They can come up with all sorts of creative names for them, but make sure you know from the start how much it can be. It can be up to £300, and often the people that charge the most won't make it obvious how much they're going to charge you. So make sure you ask upfront all these different things, whether it's all inclusive, whether there are going to be different charges for your utilities, all these kind of things. Just make sure you know for sure how much it's going to cost.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll pick up over. So yeah, guys at the back, you're welcome to sit down or just move to the sides if you want. There's a talk from Warwick Accommodation after, so it might be quite well. So yeah, deposits. Grace touched on this earlier. So one big advantage of Warwick Accommodation is the fact that you do not have to pay a deposit. With the private sector, you do. And so obviously this isn't really on your mind at the moment, you want to find housing first. But within 30 days of actually sorting out and paying the deposit, you want to have received an email which says that it's gone into a deposit protection scheme. If it hasn't, you could actually claim against your landlord for something like up to four times your deposit. So that's a really, really big thing. And what that does is just make sure that your landlord hasn't literally just gone out and spent it. So when it actually comes to the end of your tenancy, I know this is a long way off, but problems with deposits, so maybe they say, the landlord says something was broken, but you say it was broken at the start of the year. Issues like that will be solved through the deposit protection scheme. So it is quite important. But yeah, with Warwick Accommodation, you don't have to pay a deposit. So yeah, this is something else which will affect everyone going into initial short hold tenancy, which is what most of you will be doing. So from next year, you've got to have proof that you are allowed to live in the UK, you're allowed to work here, whatever. So you have to give your landlord's ID. Obviously, this is quite an important thing, and you really want to trust your landlords with something like that, because obviously they're going to have your address and potentially your ID as well. So it's important to make sure they give it back to you once you give them a copy of it, because they're legally obliged to hold it for actually a year after you've finished renting with them. So that is something to keep in mind. So yeah, I think Grace also touched on this. With Warwick Accommodation, which is what they released some of their houses today, you don't have to have a guarantor, but with some of the private sector you do. With my house, for example, you do. So some of the agents will require you to have a guarantor. What that means is someone's going to have to pick up the pieces if people don't pay their rent. So for my house, it's actually my parents who, I trust my flatmates to pay, but if they didn't, it'll be my parents who are liable to pay. So this is something to bear in mind for the private sector. You might, not all of them, but you might with most of them. With most of them, you do have to have a guarantor. So I guess keep in mind the people you're living with. Do you trust everyone to pay their rent? But again, it's something which makes Warwick Accommodation quite good. Yeah, I think it's really important to be proactive in a sense. So you've got an advice centre checklist of things you want to look for when you're looking at a house. If you're in a big group, you don't want to trust just one person to have gone to look at it. I think it's really important that everyone in the house has seen it before you move into it. I mean, you're going to be there for a year. It's quite a big deal. So there's also something in a sense that towards the end of first year or in summer term, for example, it would be a really good idea if you go to the house, actually ask the landlord if you can see it, and then things which might be wrong with it, so for example broken windows, broken doors, to pick that up with the landlord and then have them fix it over summer, so when you move in next year, it will be fixed. So for example with my house, there's like broken doors, there's a broken door and stuff like that. And once I had to sort that out at the start of this year, which is just a pain to be honest. So do be proactive, and it'll make you a lot happier. Because I mean that's quite amazing in a sense that 50% of people aren't happy with what they've moved into, and it is a really big decision. it will affect your well-being quite a lot in second or third year, whatever. So do make sure you're happy with the choice. Make sure everyone in the group's happy. Yeah, so again, we're from Student Advice Centre, but we've actually got a system. So I think we're just over there. But effectively, we will look over a contract. Most of the agents are quite bog standard. So for example, Tara & Co. It's a generic contract, and in a second, they'll be able to see it's fine. With some of the smaller agents, it's important to really check over your contract and make sure you are happy with everything. Once you've signed the contract, it's really difficult to get out of it. With Warwick Accommodation, there is some leniency, but I think those guys will touch on that later. So yeah, on the next slide, there are some details of where you can find us, as well as our email address. And that's good for checking over the contract, or just anything, to be honest. So for example, if you've got problems with your house at the moment, if you've signed a contract and for some reason you don't want to do that, I think it's quite a wide range of problem solving that they've got. So it's really useful in a sense. So yeah, so I think that's a really useful email address. So I was mentioning earlier getting contracts checked, but yeah, that's where you can find us. Just in general, really. So with housing, I'm sure most of you know, most people live in South Leamington, so that's really a student town. Like you walk along the road and there's people you know, and that's where most of the students live, particularly undergraduates. In North Leamington, it's a lot nicer, in a sense that the housing tends to be nicer, but it's less studenty and more expensive. Some undergraduates live in Earlston and Coventry, which is on the university side of Coventry. But with regards to undergraduates, those are the places they tend to live. It's really about what you and your friends want, what you're happy with. But yeah, so if anyone has any questions, just ask. Cool. Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. You ready for me now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my name is Matthew Scott, and I'm the accommodation manager for the university. So having heard a little bit about perhaps the private sector or the general issues and options that you need to be considering from your peers here in the Students' Union, I can tell you a little bit about the Warwick Accommodation and the scheme that they run. So, mindful of the sort of difficulties that students in general, not just Warwick students, but students in general, and private sector landlords can get into, it's well documented if you've got the time to research it. The university many years ago created a scheme which is basically known as a head leasing scheme, where landlords can let their property directly to the university. The university then becomes the tenant of the owner, the landlord, and we can then sublet the property back to individual or groups of students, head leasing scheme. And we have been running a head leasing scheme for a number of years. Basically, the reason we do that is from your perspective, if you are a tenant of the University of Warwick is your landlord. You come to us with your issues. You don't ever have to come into contact with the owner. We are your tenant, your landlord, you're our tenant, and we're here to deal with your any problems you have. And because we are part of the University of Warwick, we are operating in your interests. That's the theme behind why we do these things. So, we're effectively an accommodation agency, but part of the university at the same time. We source and manage what we consider to be high quality accommodation in the local area. We negotiate the terms under which it's let to us, which we then create favourable conditions for you as students to let from the university. So the let lengths, the locations, the rent, the services that you get are designed to make this as a comfortable experience as it possibly can be. And we currently manage just over 2,200 bed spaces for the current academic year, and they are located in generally southwest side of Coventry, Leamington and Kenilworth. Just to correct or make more accurate the fact that every student lives in Leamington, or the majority of students live in Leamington, according to my records, that's university records, it's actually close to 50-50. 50% students living in Leamington, 50% abound with in Coventry, southwest side of Coventry, and a relatively small number living in Leamington. So it's not quite the only place that students choose to live, but it is often seen as very attractive because it has lots of attractions that some of you will find that you want to live close to. The point, however, is it's where you feel comfortable living, whether that's Leamington, Kenilworth or Coventry, or indeed somewhere else. That's for you to work out with your friends, taking advice from others as to where is best for you to live. Bearing in mind that Coventry practically is nearer, bus routes servicing the campus from southwest Earlsdon and Chapel Fields, as was mentioned, are very frequent. The journey times to Leamington, by definition, because it's further away, will be greater. You have to work those things out as to whether that suits you. And that's the task that you've got ahead of you over the next few weeks. But what we'll try and do is put a wide range of property types and sizes. That's from a property suitable for a married couple, sharing, right through, so that's couples, 1s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s and beyond that. Those are the things that you need to be thinking about. As was mentioned, Warwick Accommodation, we don't take any deposits, any summer retainers or any agent fees. In fact, we don't ask you to pay your rent until you've probably moved in and your student loan or however you're going to be funded is paid to you sometime early in the autumn term. So no money will exchange hands between you and Warwick Accommodation probably until the autumn term. Private sector may ask for money, well they will ask for money now if you're signing for a contract now. As you have now, most of you will be living on campus, so as you have now access to 24-hour security services, you still have that if you're living in Warwick Accommodation. Once you move off campus, they're still available, they still can help you outside normal office hours should you have difficulties with your property or whatever else might be troubling you whilst living in one of the properties we manage. You also have a dedicated property manager, someone who works in Senate House through the day, that you can develop a personal relationship. That is the person responsible for your property and is there to assist you with any difficulties you may have with your flatmates, with the house, or with the neighbours, or any other issue that we may be able to help you with. And they're there during the day. So during the day you've got access to property managers. Outside office hours you've got contact through security, who are here 365 days a year. I've talked about the different let lengths that are available through Warwick Accommodation, and those are things that you need to be considering now as to how long am I actually going to need to live in this property? Does the let length meet my needs? As now, you will also be included in a core basic insurance provided by Ensley. You have one now, and the same applies when you live off campus in one of our properties. And for those of you who may be planning on bringing items that are considerably more valuable than the basic level, you can contact Ensley through their website and top up to make sure that your valuable items are properly covered to the degree that you feel appropriate. All of our properties are covered by a gas maintenance contract, so even outside office hours, if your heating should break down at the cold time of the year, which I was going to say now, but it's relatively warm at this point, but I'm sure it's going to get colder, and what you don't want is it breaking down on a Friday night. Can't contact your agent. You can contact Warwick Accommodation, and there's a gas maintenance contract where the company will come out and try and repair it for you there and then. If they can't, they'll come back with the parts, etc. very soon after that. Talked about locations. Leamington, southwest Coventry, Kenilworth is the areas that we prefer. All reasonably located bus routes coming into the campus, and we do have some properties that are indeed within walking distance. And from 12 o'clock today, you've been able to create groups before now, But now the system's live, if it's still up and running, there's a lot of activity going on, and sometimes it can fall over, but it gets put back up. It's almost like a Black Friday, that too many people are accessing the website, doing too many things, and it can put the system under strain. Just this one given day, then it's smoothed out as the time goes by. But you can apply in groups and as individuals, should you wish. The process, we couldn't bring any houses in for you to see right now, so we thought we'd just put some photographs up. These are actual properties that we manage right now. So this is the type of quality and standard that you can expect from Warwick Accommodation. Nick just flicks through them relatively quickly. So that's the kind of thing that you can expect in properties that we manage. More information's on the website. When you, and if you, decide to look at one of our properties, when you get to the website, you'll see that you can flick through photographs of the individual house. So not just examples, but the real house for you. So things to do now is take advantage of the day. There are property managers downstairs and other Warwick Accommodation staff. You can talk to them about your concerns, what you're looking for, what to do. You can visit the website. You can create your group. Right now, you can reserve up to 3 properties, but so can other people. Then you have to go and look at the property, come back and reserve the property. Having reserved the property, it's then yours, but you then need to somehow work out amongst each other who's getting which bedroom in the house. That could be easy, that could be difficult, but that's for you. Drawing straws, I think, was the recommendation of our previous team. But whatever. Arranging the viewing. This is a challenge for us because the properties will be occupied by students who are doing the same as you. Last year, we've asked them for contact details because it's their house, it's their home. We have to respect that, which we will do when you live in one of our properties. So we have to ask them for contact details. You have to contact them, make an arrangement to go and view the property that is convenient to you and to them. It's their home, as I said. If you have difficulties in doing that for whatever reason, and your deadline's coming up by which to choose the rooms, you need to tell us that you're having difficulty so we can extend your deadline. We'll understand it's not always easy to get viewing to yours and the housemates, current house tenants' satisfaction, so you need to tell us if there's difficulties and we can try and facilitate what we need to do. And then online, you can go back and sign contracts. The contracts are all visible, so if you want to, you can send them to your lawyers in New York to have them checked, make sure they're all happy, or indeed the Students' Union, pretty easier than New York, and they can check our contracts if you want to have that done to make sure it suits your needs. Online, you can sign the contract, the property is then yours. So, for today, you've got lots of opportunity to talk to other people from Warwick Accommodation. If you don't think of your questions until next week, then we're in Senate House. You can come along and talk to people in there. You can send emails if you haven't got the time to go in and speak to an individual. What I would say is, as the advice was given, take your time. Do not, this is only November, oh sorry, it's December today, isn't it? But it's fairly early in the academic year. Make sure whether it's our houses or the private sector, make sure that the property is what you really need, what you want, and meets your requirements. Make sure the people that you've decided to share with are really the people that you're going to spend next year with. You've only known them for probably only 8 or 9 weeks. You're going to have to live with them for another year. So this is a fairly important decision. So don't be rushed into it by either your peers or private sector landlords. You're not going to be rushed by Warwick Accommodation. It's all online. You make the decisions. We just have to keep the properties turning over, which is why we have to put deadlines, because if you don't want the property, someone else is likely to want it, and we want them to give the opportunity for them to go and have a look at it. So that's our process. But don't be pressured into signing for something in the private sector that you're not comfortable with. I'm happy to take any questions that anybody might have in general, or, well, about housing, or about Warwick Accommodation in particular. But there are people who...
Well, no? There's a code for a year, there's like, there's the landlord who actually inspects, and then you guys, the tenants, the venue will come out.
Yes, we do.
Does that make it more expensive because there's like a bit of
Well, generally speaking, we have a range of rents. It's for you to decide whether we're too expensive. We think we're pretty average, and our object is always to have a ladder of rents, like we do on campus. There are very cheaper campus rooms and they're very expensive campus rooms. We try to operate the same. So it's for you to decide: is this worth whatever we're asking you to pay? And we're setting the rents that we think are fair and reasonable for that property. There will be private sector operations that will charge less, but make sure, as our colleagues mentioned, make sure that you do understand all of the costs. So add in your agency fees, make sure that, am I paying water, am I paying a retainer, am I paying over the summer, how much have I got to pay as an agent's fee? Add all that up. I think when you do that, and look at it on an annual basis, the whole thing, not the weekly bit, the whole thing, and then compare us, and I'm very confident that we'll be competitive.
And don't forget, you don't need a guarantor.
No guarantors for the University of Warwick, and you don't have to do the right to rent. Because you're students of the university, that has already been confirmed. We know you're legitimately in the country.